Welcome to episode 10 of InProgress. I'm here with my good friends Daniel Indradjaja and Chilo Passe. Would you guys just like to take a sentence or two just to introduce yourself to the good people?
Introduce myself to the good people. I'm Daniel Indradjaja. I am currently the senior pastor of the Rocks Church in Perth and trying to look as good as Alistair.
I'm trying not to make an insult.
This is Chilo Passe. Who are you?
I'm Chit, and I am currently the youth director at the Rocks and SPD director at the Rocks.
And kind of like media / branding /
Yeah, you could say
Asana
that. I just do it on
queen.
the side.
Yeah, just kind of does everything basically.
Not
Yeah.
everything.
Well-
there's some things I'm bad at doing,
That is true.
but I still do them. Anyway,
We are in episode 10 and we are going to be talking about boundaries today. And I just want to start off with what comes to the forefront of your mind when you hear the word boundaries and you think church, young adults. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
people pleasing.
People pleasing.
Just saying yes to everything.
Yeah, double click. Tell me more.
Double click. All right. I have always said yes to everything, almost everything, because I think that, well, growing up, you think that, oh, if a church leader comes and tells you, hey, I'd love for you to do this, it feels like it's from God.
So you're saying you are a people pleaser. So when someone asks you to
yeah.
do something, it's like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
What about you, PD? Are you a people pleaser?
I'm very much a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And yeah, growing up, it's hard for me to maintain boundaries as well. I feel like I need to please people all the time. Still now.
Still
Struggling.
I just think it's funny because you think you grow out of it, right? It's
You
like,
don't.
yeah, you don't. I never thought of myself as a people pleaser, but my wife told me that I am. I'm a people pleaser with people I don't know. So if I don't know you, I'll be like, whatever you want. But if I know you, then I'm almost the opposite of a people pleaser.
Why is that the case, though?
I don't know. It's a character flaw, I suppose. I don't know.
No,
why.
I think it's more common than you think. I think most people are like that. That's why we behave in the office. We behave outside in a social circle. But at home, we feel like we have the freedom to be nasty to people that are close to us.
Yeah.
That's true. Every time I go see my family, like, I'm not saying I'm a terrible daughter, but
But mean shit comes out.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, 13-year-old shit comes out.
Yeah, it's
And
funny, isn't it?
And I don't realize that until, like, I leave that situation. I'm like, whoa, what was that? I'm not that person anymore. Why have I gone back to that person? So strange.
It's actually something I've heard you talk about before, PD, of like, it's almost like a self-control thing where your self-will or your self-determination kind of runs out, right? So it's like, I'm going to be disciplined, I'm going to be disciplined, I'm going to be disciplined. And then you get somewhere and you're like, oh, I can relax here. And then all of that self-discipline that you've been exercising disappears and it's suddenly like, oh, I'm a narky teenager again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they say self-discipline is like a muscle, right? If you go to the gym, after you do certain reps, you just can't do it anymore. And so I guess, those psychologists, sociologists, they're correct that there's a limit to your self-discipline as well. That's why you need a space that is safe for you to, be who you are and in a safe way, in a good way.
Which is an interesting concept when you think through boundaries, because is boundaries self-discipline then, or is boundaries something different?
Yeah, I think it is. Self-discipline.
That's a good question. I think boundaries is both self-discipline as well as an understanding that you have a predetermination, if you like, as to like where you draw the line, just to protect yourself, your well-being, your emotion, and everything else as well.
Because it is a hard thing, right? Because in some respects, boundaries, you don't want to like over-capitalize on them, right? Because sometimes you go, I'm going to draw a boundary, and your boundary is this big. And it's like, well, there is a little bit more to your life than just the 20-cent piece. What is that like as a pastor, PD? Is it people pleaser and a senior pastor asking people, which is kind of your job, right, is to challenge people to become more like Jesus. But at the same time, you've also kind of got to respect the boundary. what is that like?
Yeah, I think for someone like me, when I say someone like me, I mean someone who's supposedly responsible for other people's lives. Although I'm not responsible for their lives, but you feel like you're responsible to grow them. You feel responsible to teach them well and so that they can grow. But then, unless you have a clear boundary, you can cross it and think that it's your fault if they're not growing. It's your fault if they don't do this. And so, what was the question again?
I don't even know, man. It's the beauty of a conversation.
Yeah, I guess I have to be really clear in my mind as to what is my responsibility and what is my responsibility. For example, it is my responsibility to teach well. It is my responsibility to encourage. It is my responsibility to help people who come to me for advice to consider options. But it is not my responsibility if they do make the wrong choice or if they don't respond the way I think they should respond. And I think I need to make that line super clear. Otherwise, I will feel the emotional grunt of not doing a good job or...
Which is so interesting, right? Because it's almost like you need to have total clarity in your, like you're saying, your role and your responsibilities. And once that's clear, then it's much easier to set the boundary, right?
Yeah.
Which can sometimes be muddy in churchland because we all kind of wear multiple hats sometimes, right? Like we might be serving on this team a little bit. We might be part of a small group. We might be part of a broader community. And sometimes it can get murky. Would love your thoughts on this, Chit, because you wear many, many hats. Has it been hard to draw boundaries for you?
Extremely hard to this day.
That was a leading question. That was not fair. She talks about her boundary breaking all the time.
Yeah. Even this week on Monday. Monday's like our day off. Yet I looked at a message because I didn't turn my notifications up, like your message. And I respond. I could have not responded to it, but I did. And then you told me off. Why are you looking at my messages on a Monday? And I'm like, because I saw it. I think, yeah, honestly, it's hard when you wear multiple hats. It's hard as a pastor. It's hard at church because it's not, and people say this all the time, but it's not like church is not a 9-to-5 job. Like, sure, there are aspects of this, of ministry and administrative work that is done during the day, but people, when it comes to people, it's not something you can just clock in and out of. If they need you, they need you.
Yeah.
If they ask to meet on a weekend, then that's when you're free too. So you'll meet with them, and I'm happy to meet with them. But I guess the moments in my life where I've had to choose between this person that I'm ministering to or leading or catching up with, and my family or friends or whatever, it's hard to say no to this ministry or this person that I'm catching up with because you care. But then it takes a toll on your family.
I think the example that you just gave, though, for me, that is not breaking boundaries so much, I reckon. Say you receive a quick text on a Monday, your day off, and you reply no or yes or whatever. As long as, to me, that is not affecting your emotional well-being or your ability to rest or it's not affecting you in a negative way.
Yeah.
To me, you're not breaking boundary. But when you start doing that so often that you're unable to rest because of your reply to that text requires a lot more emotional involvement out of you. To me, then, because again, like what you said, but the nature of the job is such that we cross the 9-to-5 boundaries all the time.
Yeah.
But when it starts affecting you in a negative way, to me I think you cross the boundary there. And also, I think we're crossing boundaries when we, because of what we do or say, we actually enable the other person from taking responsibility for their own lives. And to me, we're breaking boundaries there. You know, when we help people when we're not supposed to, I think we're breaking boundaries because that's considered enablement already.
Yeah.
We're not allowing that person to struggle or to flourish the way they should in order to grow.
How do you know that this particular struggle is something that that we can allow them to struggle with without helping. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Very good.
Very good.
Like, how do you know?
I think it requires discernment. I read this book. I'm sure, Alistair, you read this book as well, called Boundaries by John Townsend and what's the other author?
I cannot tell you.
Henry Cloud
Henry
and John
Cloud,
Townsend.
the big dog.
Yeah. So he started off the book by telling a story of how his parents came to him asking for advice because the children refused to do the responsible things. And upon listening to the parents, it was clear to him that the parents have been enabling the child. That's why they're not taking responsibilities.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's a classic example. I love his physical example, how we don't do this in the physical realm, right? Let's say you mow your lawn, and then your neighbors shout from the fence, "Why don't you mow my lawn?" You clearly will respond by saying, "Hey, that's not my responsibility. It's your lawn. It's not my lawn." But when it comes to the other stuff, somehow we don't see that boundary as clearly.
Oh, very good.
And then we cross it all the time.
Yeah.
And we feel guilty if we don't help out or something.
Well, I feel like people feel guilty because we're called to love people, right? I think the lines become blurry because we're like, okay, what does love require of me?
Yeah.
But then where do boundaries fit in that? I don't think people are taught enough about boundaries. They end up loving and giving so much that they become resentful.
That's where the term tough love comes in,
Yeah.
right? Where you need to exercise tough love by resisting.
Yeah.
By not helping is actually...
And I think this is what
Possibly
is
it's showing
interesting, right?
tough
Because
love.
it has to come from a deep understanding of what love actually is. Because I think oftentimes we have a culturally formed definition of love,
Yeah.
which says to make someone's life easier. But that oftentimes is not actually love, because it might be loving in that moment, but long term, you're then, like you've said, you've essentially disabled that person from being able to fight their own fight, to gain the resilience they need, to learn the skills they might need or whatever. And I think this is an interesting thing in the context of church, because I think oftentimes we think very negatively of boundaries, like, oh, we have to have boundaries to protect ourselves. But I actually think that sometimes we set up boundaries to protect ourselves, and in so doing, and this is controversial, and I haven't fully formed the thought on it, but I think in so doing, we form these boundaries and we actually stop ourselves from living the reality that Jesus lived. Because I reckon if Jesus drew as hard lines on boundaries as some of us young adults do today,
It's good.
I don't know that we would have seen the life of Jesus that we saw. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many times in Jesus' life where he is like haggard and at the end of his rope, and people come to him with a need,
Still helps him.
and he chooses to sacrifice himself further.
So you're saying a lot of the young adults today, their boundaries are too small.
I have not said that directly, but I reckon it is out.
It's
I think
possible.
we've kind of overcorrected, right? So I think
Yeah.
I'm a bit older, so I'm 31 now. I think in my generation of young adults, and probably yours as well, I think we got pushed really hard. And I think
Yeah.
some of that was our own
Sure.
fault.
Yeah.
We
We just
had
said
like-
yes to everything.
Yeah, we had a big drive, big vision. We're like, let's go, let's change the world. And you find yourself like not doing the things that you should be doing as a growing Christian, right? So you're not actually investing time in prayer, in study of the word. You're not putting yourself under a pastoral leadership and saying, please speak into my life, show me where I'm short-sighted or whatever. Instead, you just output. And then you end up burning out. And then you're like, oh, people ask me to do too much. And it's like, no, I did too much. That was my choice.
Yeah.
But I also chose not to build the spiritual foundation
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
of the solidarity and my love of Jesus. Am I overstating that, or do you think that is fair?
I think that's pretty fair.
Very true.
I think every individual at the end of the day must decide, is this boundary that I'm setting helping me, or is it actually limiting me? Right? Sometimes we can fool ourselves into thinking, oh, I'm doing this to create boundaries for myself so that I can be emotionally healthy and strong. But it's actually, in a way, maybe, I will have to say this carefully, it could be a form of, like you say, laziness, or you just don't want to push yourself
Yeah.
further,
Like people use it as an excuse to not
Be-
do
people-
anything.
yeah, to not do anything.
Yeah. And I think it is it is difficult because I think all of us want to do the easier option, right?
Yeah.
Like it is much easier to say no to something with the best intentions of like, no, I need to look after myself. Then you say no to this opportunity and then you end up wasting that time scrolling or
That's right.
watching Netflix.
Yeah.
And in the end, you've thought you're going to get rest, but it's like, it's not real rest.
Yes.
So then, I don't know, I think you lose on both accounts, right?
Yeah, you're losing the
Yeah.
opportunity to make a difference, and then
Yeah.
you're not getting the rest that you think you need as well. Yeah.
Unless you're intentional about that rest, but most people aren't.
Yeah. I love the way that John Mark Comer says this. He's got a great series on Sabbath. They used to do it every year at Bridgetown Church when he was senior pastor there. And he would say this from stage, which I find fascinating because like he's like grown up in a very, very like conservative kind of life. But he would just call like the American rest, he would just call it a bastard Sabbath. Do you know, it's like, it's not a real,
Rest.
it's not real. You call it rest, but it's not. All you're doing is like vegetating. You're not actually restoring your soul.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think this is the danger of this boundaries conversation is that we go, you've got to have balance and you've got to have all these things. But I think in the end, we're not prioritizing what matters most,
Yep.
which
Yeah.
is seeing Jesus made famous in our hearts and therefore being able to carry that into the world that we live in,
Yeah.
True.
because we drew really hard boundaries and said, no, I'm not doing that. But then in the end, we didn't do anything either way. So
Mm.
I don't know. Is that a
Yeah.
bit of a soapbox moment?
No, I think that's it. It brings me to this thought that I had like literally today. I was thinking like, how we were made to be in God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why rest. We feel most rested when we've been in God's presence, when we've spent time with Him, when we've actually delighted in Him.
Mm.
And when we don't do that and we call it rest, we're like, why don't I feel rested? Well, because you haven't been in His presence.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And yeah, so I find it, I don't know, I feel like I know that, but then I just go on Netflix. I
Yeah.
scroll.
Yeah.
You know?
Because it's easier though, right?
Yeah, because it's easy.
Yeah.
I've once heard it described as like, I can't remember all of them. You probably can because you've got like 5 degrees, but the 7, they're not 7 deadly sins. I don't know what they are. The sloth one though, right? I've often heard it described, and I think it's a great definition. It is like spiritual opposition to spiritual growth.
Ooh.
Mm.
So it's like you want in your heart of hearts, right? Because you've encountered this risen King of the
Yeah.
universe, and He has changed your life from the inside out. You have the indwelling Holy Spirit, and you're like, I want so badly to be in the presence of my Father. But at the end of the day, like it's actually easier, not to, right? Which is, it is difficult. I think also coming back to that, someone said to me once when I was much younger, if you want to know all of the problems, go to Genesis because that's where you'll find all the answers. And I find that in Genesis, right, we are created to be in the presence of God, but we are also created to work, right?
Yeah.
We are
And that happened before the fall.
before the fall.
The commandment to work is before the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not work. It's not a punishment for the fall.
Yeah. And do
It's
you
a
find this interesting? This is something I've been thinking a lot on lately, is that in that Genesis kind of narrative, it's like 6 days of work, 1 day of rest.
Yeah.
And in our culture at the moment, right, we've got this kind of 5-day work, 2-day rest,
Yeah.
and all of us are still exhausted.
And they're talking
Yeah.
about 4-day work
Yeah.
and 3-day rest.
Yeah. Which again, I'm not a masochist. I'm not saying like burn your life to the ground to work
Yeah.
to an early grave. But I find it fascinating that because I think none of us actually take a full day off, right? Would you say? I don't know.
We try, but
We try. You're probably better at it than I am, I reckon.
What do you mean when you say we don't take a full day off?
like no ministry, no
Yeah,
work.
like kind of like what you were saying. Like, I'll just quickly check a message or whatever. For me, I reckon that would feel like but not for you though, right?
Yeah, I guess our makeup is so different. I think from person to person. That for me, what over the years, what I learned to take care of is knowing yourself well. Nowadays, when you talk to physical trainer, they talk about knowing your body, knowing when to rest, knowing let your body speak to you about where it hurts and stuff like that. I think knowing yourself well is the key to this whole thing. I think boundaries are necessary for us for that protection, to protect ourselves, but don't make boundaries to be the master. The boundaries are slaves. They're there to help us.
Very good.
So as long as it helps you, that's what's important. So don't worry about, when I do this, am I breaking my boundary? Am I like, hey, if it doesn't affect you in a negative way, and you're still doing well, at your work or in taking care of yourself, then that's all right. But what's the point of having boundaries and then you're not doing well still? To me, that doesn't help. So
you can almost get legalistic about the boundaries.
Exactly.
Which then causes you to stress more because you're like, oh
actually,
my gosh,
you become more stressed because you feel like you're breaking boundaries all the time when actually it shouldn't stress you. It shouldn't stress you that much. Yeah.
It's like what you said earlier today, like in this conversation. Like, is this boundary helping me reach my potential, or is it limiting me?
Yeah. So interesting. I think every person definitely needs to examine themselves and just look where do I need to establish boundaries that will be helpful for me. Forget about what boundaries Chit is setting for herself and what boundaries you set for yourself. For me, yes, my weekend is precious, but responding to 2 or 3 messages, it doesn't hurt me one bit. But if it does hurt you, like you feel like, oh no, that means I can't switch up, then you shouldn't be replying those messages.
And I do reckon as well, just even on that thought, right? Like I think when I was younger, I felt like I wanted much more black and white answers to everything. But I feel like the older I'm getting, the more I'm realizing that life is just kind of grey. And like you said, like if you can't know yourself, then you can't know what your kind of vices or traps are going to be.
That's right.
So like for me, I'm like a 3 on the Enneagram. I like to get things done. And so for me, having like a time where I switch my phone off is really important for me because I'm like, the temptation to like, I'll just check if anyone's messaged, even though I've got notifications off, I've tried to do the right thing. I'm still like, I'll just check because if I can like respond now, then maybe it'll get done faster, so that for me is an important boundary, but it sounds like it's not for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you can learn principles from other people, right? But at the end of the day, you've got to work out what is actually important in your context.
What's important and what works for you.
Yeah. Everyone's different.
Yeah. Don't forget to use your mic, PD.
I know.
He's talking
Keep
down
forgetting.
here. I've got a proverb. Love the Proverbs. It's from Proverbs 4. It says, let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil. What do you guys think about this proverb in the context of boundaries?
Sorry, I wasn't listening very well.
No, it's fine.
Do you need to read it?
I'll read it again.
It's my ADHD. My mind tend to wander sometimes.
Yeah. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Keep your foot from evil.
All right. Good proverbs.
They're all pretty good, honestly.
Yeah. For me, that proverb, without knowing the context, it seems like it's important for you to know your direction in life and your goal.
Very good.
And to not let anything else distract you from it, which is why setting the right boundaries is important. Otherwise, you will be distracted. You will stay off course. And
I think it actually comes back to what you were identifying before, which is when you understand your role correctly, it's much easier to set those boundaries. I think for a lot of us when we're young adults, we actually don't know our purpose or our role in the grander scheme of life.
That's right.
What is God doing in and through my life to change the narrative of the kingdom or whatever it is? And so because of that, we then end up drawing misshapen boundaries.
Yeah.
Because we've kind of misidentified where the end goal is, right? Do you think that's fair?
That's
Definitely.
very fair.
It's like the age-old question, what's my calling?
What's
my purpose?
Yeah.
Like,
What's yours, Chit? Do you know?
it's to therefore go and make disciples of all nations.
Which I think though, right? If you put that at the forefront though, and I think I know you're kind of saying it in jest, but like if that is really the case, if that is the identity that Jesus is calling us to, and we know, I can't remember the Greek, it's poieo, but what's the tense in the go and make disciples? It's basically like as you go,
It's,
right? It's
it's participle.
Yeah, so it's basically like
I don't like
your
Greek.
you don't know Greek.
Sorry.
I'm currently learning Greek, and it's very hard. But it's like this idea of like this is your identity now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that shifts your understanding of how boundaries work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if your identity is I'm making disciples, it's now very hard to draw a line that says, well, at 5:30 p.m.
I switched off.
I've switched off, or
Yeah.
I have to say no to that because I've got boundaries. And it's like, great, but are you saying no because it's inconvenient, or are you saying no because it's actually stopping you from making disciples?
I was just thinking as you said that, is it possible when Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan, the Levite and the priest did not stop to help the person who got robbed because they set boundaries
Oh,
incorrectly?
oh, very good.
I have a job to do at the temple. I can't be late.
Oh,
If I touch this person, I'll be unclean.
Yeah.
So that's the boundary they set for themselves. But in so doing, they're not loving their neighbor.
oh, oh.
That's true.
This actually happened to me the other day. Sorry, this is an interesting aside. I was on my way to work and like up here in Cannington, and you guys know traffic coming north is atrocious. Sometimes it's over an hour.
Yeah.
And the traffic was like very, very bad. But there was a guy that was bogged on the side of the freeway. Like he'd driven his two-wheel drive car into the sand. And I felt it in the moment. I was like, you need to stop and help this guy. And the first thing I did was looked at my watch and I said, I will be late for a meeting. And I got about another 100 meters down the road and I just went, what am I doing? I'm going to work at a church where I'm going to go and preach a message telling other people, sacrifice your personal comfort for other people. I'm like, I just pulled over. He didn't need help in the end. He'd called RAC, but I found
I'm glad you pulled over.
but I did though, right? Because I literally was like, that is so hypocritical.
Wait, so
is
you
so
did
good.
pull over?
I did pull over in the end.
Oh, good on ya.
A few hundred
Well
meters
done.
down the road. And then I walked back
So
and he was
good.
like, oh, I'm fine. But I reckon
That's
in
so
that
good.
moment, it was only because I actually paid attention to it. But how often does that happen in life where we're like, I probably should do something, but X, Y, Z, I've drawn the boundary that X, Y, Z is more important.
Yeah.
And I don't see that in the life of Jesus.
No, so good.
That's true.
Yeah.
Jesus' life, like, don't you see in the almost every time that he did a miracle, it was an interruption. Like he was going somewhere or doing something, but a lot of the times he was interrupted. Like the turning water into wine, he was just enjoying his time. And then an interruption came saying, "Hey Jesus, we have an issue. Can you help?" You know, all sorts of other times. Like, how do we view those interruptions? How do I view those interruptions? I feel like I view it as an interruption. I'm like, no, I need to do this, but then it ends up compromising what we've been called to do, to love.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that means, this conversation has helped me too. We need to be aware that the boundary that we set up for ourselves is not an excuse,
Very good.
right?
Very
So
good.
maybe the question that I need to be asking more and more is this boundary helping me to live my life as a follower of Jesus? Or is this boundary an excuse for me
Yeah.
to be
Very
a
good.
follower of Jesus?
Yeah.
So it's one or the other, right?
Yeah.
So setting boundary is important, but then again, be critical about what you tell yourself, what this boundary is for, and what it's really for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also at the end of the day, I think when we set boundaries, we're saying no to this. When we say no to something, we're saying yes to something else.
Very true.
So if we're saying yes to this, what are we saying no to? And are we
Yeah.
okay saying no to that? And I think that's what I'm always
Good.
scared of, because if I say no to this person or this task or this project, then that means I'm saying, wait, did I say yes or no first?
Should know, but
I
should
said
we
no.
say
Okay, yeah.
yes
If
or
I
no?
say, sorry, if I say no
Yeah.
to this, and okay, like, what am I saying yes to? If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to?
Yeah.
And like, I'm scared that I'll let people down. Well, that's at least my biggest fear when it comes to saying no and having boundaries. Because the reality is, especially if other people aren't used to you setting boundaries, they're probably going to be hurt. if it's a person
Mm-hmm.
or people. Like, but they might not. Like, it really depends.
I love the way Pete Scazzero says this. He says, learning to say no and saying no to your false self and saying yes to your true self will always result in disappointment from other people.
Yeah.
Because other people want you to be their version of you and not your version of you. Does that make sense? Or the version that you are learning about that God has made you to be or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm very conscious. Well, the three of us work in a church. So all of this conversation is very church-centric. I think there is a very real world that a lot of people are working in and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There are new laws about right to disconnect and stuff like that. And I think it is because some employers do take advantage of their staff and they expect, 60, 70-hour weeks. My brother was an accountant, still is an accountant. He didn't lose his job. But, when he first started, he would sometimes pull a 70-hour week, because he was at a big four firm. And no one kind of bats an eyelid. It's just kind of like, oh, that's what you do in that industry.
It's just culture there.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting to me because how then do you reckon you walk out a Christian faith that says, actually, my number one priority in life is not my career. It is a part of my life and it's something that will be used to accomplish my ultimate mission. What a banger.
What a banger.
That's a great ringtone. That's awesome.
That's soothing.
So have you guys got any thoughts on that in terms of like, I hate the word, but like work-life balance on drawing boundaries? Like, because I think it's a riskier endeavor, right? If your boss doesn't understand the concept of like, I don't know.
Of work-life balance?
Well, not even work-life balance, just more like if your boss asks you to do something, you kind of have to say yes, right? It's very hard to say, no, I'm not going to do that. If it's within the scope of your work and your job description and it's required in your contract, you can't really say, no, I'm not doing that. Can you? I don't think you can.
Or what if it's not? Or what if they're asking you to do overtime and it's not in your job description? Would you still say yes? I feel like I would.
You would say yes?
I'm a people pleaser, so yeah, I would. And I would want to be my best.
Yeah.
And
I
this is
think,
part of it.
I think this is where, again, knowing ourselves, is this a one-off thing or is this a habitual thing? Like it happens all the time. To me, I think there's no easy answer in terms of like,
gray.
It's always in the gray. Our life is in the gray. Yeah. And again, if it's a one-off thing, I think, you do well to help as much as you can, right? But again, if it's consistently happening, you might want to protect yourself by saying no and by respectfully, asking the boss if it can be done next week or whatever.
What if they don't comply? What if they're like,
then if it's
fired.
persistently happening, you might have to look for a new job. New place of work.
Yeah, and I think that is fair, right? Because you can't expect, life is messy and the world is messy, workplaces are messy. You can't expect it to be carbon copy every day, consistent. There are seasons and there are ebbs and flows.
That's right.
And I think it's learning, like you said, learning, is this thing habitual? Is it a constant problem or is it, this is a hard week and that's okay.
Yeah.
Very
Cool.
good. We've got another verse here. Kind of leads in perfectly. Amazing. It's almost like I planned this. Galatians 6. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions, then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else. For each one should carry their own load. Nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. I didn't need to include the last verse, but, I just think, you teach the word pretty well, PD. No one probably ever says thank you. We could thank you.
Thank you.
But what do you think about this idea, like the church community as someone who carries one another's burdens?
I like how that verse is almost like a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, we are to carry each other's burden. On the other hand, we are responsible for our own action.
Yeah.
So, and that's the double-sided effect of boundaries. I find some people, they refuse to take responsibility for the there's
Their own
condition
workload. Yeah.
for their own life, and always blaming other people. Oh, I'm this way because my parents didn't bring me up right.
Yeah.
I'm this way because of this. So in a way, that's the opposite of boundaries, where you shove responsibility that's supposed to be yours onto other people.
Yeah.
So
And then you quote Galatians 6:2. Hey, we've got to bear one another's burdens.
yeah.
You forget about the other half.
Quote the rest of the verse, please.
Yeah. So back to the lawn mowing example again.
Yeah.
You're responsible to mow your own lawn. And if your lawn is not looking healthy, you can't blame your neighbor. You can't blame your pastor. You can't blame your teacher. You can't blame your parents.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm responsible
Yeah.
for this lawn.
Yeah.
Right. So, but as a Christian, I like the fact that Jesus carried my burden, and I need to be more like Jesus in helping other people carry their burden whenever I can. Right.
What would be the definition of burden then?
Oh.
It's not everything. It's a burden. It's something that's really, really heavy. Not everything that you're responsible for,
Yeah.
right?
It's a great question, actually. I don't know the context of the verse well enough to know what he's talking about here.
Me
I can't
neither. I'm
remember.
not familiar with the context of that. I
Yeah,
know the
yeah.
verse very well, but I don't know. The
Yeah,
context.
exactly. This is the classic, right?
But I think it could mean, generally speaking, like you be there for each other, right?
Yeah.
You make time for people. So the other day I was talking to a pastor friend of mine who had a really difficult domestic issue at home, and it's affecting his work at church. And I was thinking to myself, man, if I was in his situation, I don't even know if I could carry on doing church work.
Wow.
And it was that heavy. But I can't carry that burden for him, in a sense, that responsibility of going through that difficult, I guess, episode in his life. But I can be there for him if he needs to unload, if he needs just to chill, even for 1 hour. I think he needs that time from time to time, and I did make myself available by texting him after the conversation. I said, hey, if you want to catch up for coffee or unload or whatever, I'm here anytime. Just text me.
Which ironically would be a breach of your boundaries in that sense, right? Of like you're willing to sacrifice like a soft line in your calendar or whatever
Yeah.
in order to bear the burden of another,
Yeah.
which I think is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of every single time someone struggles with something and I learn about it, or they tell me about it, and I look at my calendar and it's so full. But like there's something inside of me that's like they've asked me to help. I really need to, and I tell them I will make time for you. I will drop what I'm doing. Like I have literally dropped what I'm doing, like a task or a project, and gone to see them.
Very
Or
good.
be like, hey, just come now.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but there's so much I need to get done, and then I get to the end of the day, I go, I'm glad I helped them, but now I have to somehow fit time to do this task because I
That's the
should have
price
done
that you
today.
pay for
That's what I
helping
say
people,
no to
right?
because I
Yeah.
said yes.
Yeah.
Which coming back to your Samaritan example is exactly that, right? That Samaritan that stopped, obviously had to stop whatever it was that they were going to do
Yeah.
in order to love this person,
That's right.
and went so far over and above what was
Yeah.
required.
Yeah.
And Jesus uses a shining example. Like this is what love is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's especially difficult in our modern world where kind of everyone is trying to align like their work with like a larger calling, right? Like I'm making a difference through my work. So then we think our projects that we're working on are really important because I'm loving, the environment or people or whatever it is through my work. And oftentimes we can use it as an excuse not to actually love people.
Yeah.
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 I'm doing
True.
that. Ultimately, this will be more loving. It's like, well, maybe, but there is someone who just needs something right now.
That's right.
And it's
Yeah,
not.
Yeah.
It may not be
Yeah.
as glamorous, but
Yeah.
it's just as needed.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
Very good.
wonder though how many people, if we're going back to that of what the Samaritan did, like how many of us Christians, pastors especially, actually go the distance in terms of like how do we actually go above and beyond, or do our boundaries go, oh, that's enough, like you can only stay here a day, or like I don't know if that's a question, but like how many of us actually go beyond what's required?
Yeah. I think that people on both sides of the spectrum. I think there are pastors who literally, work themselves to death and to the point that they got burned out and unfortunately had to end their ministry earlier than they need to, because they couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you also have pastors with hard boundaries that are not helpful for the kingdom, not showing what the love of Jesus Christ is really like.
Yeah, it's like the classic do as I say, don't do as I do.
And so
but I reckon it comes back again though, because you've got to define your role and your responsibility, right? I go back to Acts 6 all the time on this because the church is thriving, it's growing, and there's some real issues that come about. One of them is who is going to feed the widows, which is a massive cultural problem at the time. And the apostles at the time basically say, we want to do this and it is important, but our primary responsibility is the devotion of prayer and the ministry of the word.
Yeah.
We need other people to help us
come along
to be able to do this. And I think sometimes, especially in the modern world, pastors kind of get given all of the responsibility for everything that needs to happen in a church. And I think this is kind of a result of like the consumer Christianity model of like, I come to church for a service and you will provide it, rather than like, oh no, we're a community of believers that is coming together to sit under God's teaching and then to go out and live out the incredible truth of the gospel. And I think that can be part of that boundary problem, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So sometimes we are limited in our capacity to give because we're kind of in a world that says give everything you've got, when really we probably should be more selective in,
That's right.
in what we give, maybe.
Or at least delegate.
Or at least delegate, right? Which some pastors are not good at doing.
Yeah.
I reckon I'm one of them. I would hold on to things longer than I probably should.
But like you said, the more Christians share the responsibility, the least selective we need to be as pastors, right?
Very good.
If everybody steps up to the plate, just do what they're supposed to do, loving people, contributing whatever they can in whatever gifting that they've been given, then it'll make it. We don't have to make that hard choice between, do I need to take care of myself or do I need to help people? So
I actually think that's universal for everybody in the church, right? Because the reason we have to even have conversations around boundaries is because the same people usually get asked all the time because no one else is actually coming to the plate.
That's right.
Yeah. Or at least not reliable enough.
Or maybe not reliable enough. And I think that maybe that's what Paul is getting at here of like, bear one another's burdens. Like we've got to remember there's a whole group of people here that are carrying stuff, and you've got your own responsibility in this great family of God, in this great context. You have got a load to carry. And if you don't carry it, ultimately someone else will have to, which is not fair on that person because now you're then encroaching on their boundaries.
Yeah. I have a question for PD, actually.
For me, why not Alistair?
Yeah, I agree. Doesn't trust me, Pity.
You've been in the game a little longer. No, but like, no, it's, have you ever, since we're talking about boundaries and the idea of that we're not necessarily responsible for their people's faith, have you ever had anybody tell you or get mad because you didn't help them or you set a boundary? And if that ever happened, what did you do?
Oh yeah, happens all the time, I'm sure.
But do they actually tell you or get mad at you? Like, why?
That's what his missed call was
they
before.
don't get they don't get mad at you. They just leave the church. Right? That's what they do. So, for
That's
example,
true.
the classic
Interesting,
example is because is this. The classic example is I don't get fed in this church.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't get discipled enough. I don't get whatever it is that they think they need to be getting that they didn't get. Forgetting that discipleship is their responsibility, not my responsibility.
Yeah.
My responsibility is to equip, to encourage, to build up. But at the end of the day, growing in Christ is your own responsibility. And to put that responsibility on other people is not recognizing the boundary that you have. Right?
Yeah.
Or not having that boundary. That's a classic example of people blaming other people for whatever that they have or don't have. And but to be fair, whenever I hear such complaint or whatever, I do need to look at myself to see like, okay, what have I done? Have I been responsible with the boundary that I need to be responsible for? Maybe I haven't been equipping enough. That's fair, right? So as long as I know that within this boundary of responsibility that I have, I've done everything that I can as well as I could. Then I think it is okay for me to say, hey, sorry, but
Yeah.
that is not my responsibility.
How then would you
Yeah.
know then if you've done everything that you can? How would you know, like,
I think you
oh, I
can't
have not done
know.
enough?
I think because you're a fallen, broken human being, and so are they. And all you
Yeah.
can do is bring what you've got.
That's
And you
Mm.
can't go back and change it, right? You can't be
Yeah.
like, I could have given more, I could have given less. You just got to hope that whatever you gave, God can use,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think perhaps I'm just projecting my insecurities because
Yeah.
I always feel like, oh, have I done enough? Like whenever someone does leave or
Mm.
bring their not struggle but complaint, I'm like, oh, I blame myself first. I'm like, oh, did I not do enough? Am I not teaching these things that they need to be taught, or do I need to see them more? Do I need to meet regularly, or do I need to host a Bible study? Like what
Yeah.
what do I
it's
need to
interesting,
do?
isn't it?
But then I also look at what they're doing, which is like what you say, like, okay, are you engaging with the 6Gs? Are you reading your Bible? Are you spending time with Jesus? Are you in a small group? And usually they're not doing one of them, right? That's what you always say.
Yeah.
But what if they're doing all of them and they're saying these things?
I think you're allowed to be different though, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end
Yeah.
of the day, like, I don't know.
Yeah, usually if people take responsibility for their own life, they will see growth. Unless they have a mistaken idea of what growth is, or maybe
Yeah.
they're impatient with their own growth. They don't realize it's a lifelong process, and they're expecting to be a certain way at a certain time. You know, when in a certain limited time, then it's just a case of mistaken expectation. Yeah. But yeah.
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 Should we talk about a couple of common misconceptions?
Sure.
We've kind of talked around most of them already, but boundaries are selfish. Are boundaries selfish?
We talk about it, right? It can be.
It can be.
If you
Yeah.
if you just use it as an excuse to not do anything or not
Mm.
help people, then it can be selfish.
Yeah.
I think boundaries will always look selfish to those that you've given the most to, or
Ooh,
you've given a lot to.
interesting.
So I think at least with it, what I've experienced over the past few years, like I've always been really bad with boundaries. So when I actually started to put my boundaries up, or even if it's like a small boundary, certain people were disappointed. They got mad at me. And I'm like, okay, it's like I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a bad person, but like I'm not valuing my time with God or what I need and my rest if I don't put a boundary. But then I'm also, it's as if they feel like I'm not valuing them if I say no to them.
And I would say, I mean, I don't know your full story, but I would assume then that you were probably not in a healthy place, which is why you put the boundaries in place,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
To prioritize what mattered.
Yeah.
Yeah. In which case then it might look selfish from the outside, but actually it's quite selfless because you're actually saying, I want to be able to protect
Yeah.
the way that I can love other people.
Or I want to stay in this game for
For the long haul.
the long haul. You know,
Yeah.
not just here for a week or a year.
Yeah.
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 I think
And
as long as you know that you are doing it not for selfish reason, I think being honest with yourself is the key here.
Yeah.
Very
And
good.
why am I doing this? Is it for my longevity in this career or in this ministry, or is it just an excuse? It's a classic example of putting your own mask at an aeroplane when the oxygen mask drop. If you don't put oxygen mask on yourself, then you can't help your children if you're traveling with your children.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it might look selfish, like, oh, how come you put that on yourself and not on your kids? You know.
Yeah.
But I'll put it on myself. I can't put it on my kids.
Yeah.
That's true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting to me, like you read the life of Jesus and he's not super hard fast on many things, but rest is actually one of them.
Yeah.
Like there's in Mark he's like trying to get the disciples to go rest because they've just gone out. They've gone and like, you know, sent out demons and healed people and whatever. And Jesus is like, come away with me for a while and let's rest. But then they get caught up in a crowd and doing some miracles.
Yeah.
And then Jesus is like, okay, let's get on the boat. We've got to go and rest. And then there's a storm and Jesus quietens the storm. And then finally, Jesus goes and rests, but the disciples don't.
Yeah.
And I find it interesting that basically this is one that he was not willing to compromise on. And he's actually like, you don't have to have this boundary, but I am going to have it.
Yeah.
Which I just find an interesting thing because, again, it might look selfish. Like, oh, Jesus, come on. The disciples need you. They've just come back from this trip. They need a debrief, whatever.
Yeah.
And he's saying, well, this is more important than what they need.
Yeah.
But again, it's coming with the right attitude of like, I understand
That's
my
right.
larger picture and mission.
Very good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on boundaries? Oh, this has been a fantastic conversation. By the
Yeah,
way.
absolutely.
Been enjoying my tea in my InProgress mug. This is episode 10, but the irony is that I've tried to introduce this in almost every episode, forgotten all of them. Finally introduced them in an episode the other day. Camera died, so there's no actual image of the cup. But
So you only introduced the cup towards the end?
yeah, I think the final episode actually.
Is this the final episode?
I think it is.
Is it?
I don't know. It's episode 10.
Oh.
There you go.
Oh, cool.
Well done for doing it.
Yeah.
Oh.
Good on you.
It's been a good time.
Yeah.
It has.
Thank you guys for being on the pod. I really appreciate it. Got great respect for both of you, and I'm glad that we get to hear your voices.
Thank you for the invite.
Yeah.
Been fun.
Yeah. Honored to be here.
Great. Thanks for joining us. We will see you next season, I guess.
Wow.
Bye.